One time when my wife and I were out of the house, the daughter was visiting and she was staying there, and so she was out on the back porch just enjoying the late evening. It wasn't even sundown. And we have about 100 acres, and there's this hay grass field off to the south. And she was looking out there, and at first she was thinking, she saw something burning, she thought, and she thought, who the heck would be lighting a bonfire on our property? And then she realized that it was fire that was well above the ground, and it was ball-shaped. It was literally a fireball. And she was looking at that and just barely beginning to absorb the idea that this thing might be something unusual. And she's the kind of person that does not appeal to at all. And suddenly it disappeared. And then maybe 30 degrees to the right of that, it appeared. I'm a person who's spent his life working with science and technology. Got degrees in science from Berkeley and systems analysis degree from the Air Force Institute of Technology. I spent some time in the Air Force. So I was familiar from being in the Air Force with the concept of UFOs and the fact that many pilots had seen these kinds of things. So it wasn't something that I thought was non-existent, but I never personally had any experience with anything like that, and certainly was the kind of person that didn't jump to conclusions about anything without going through the scientific process and having good evidence. So after leaving the Air Force, I ended up moving to Canada, and while I was there, I came across some websites that were covering the history of the crop circles in England, and they go back to the 70s. And I looked through all of that and realized that there was really something here. There was no way, we don't have the technical skill to produce things the size of several football fields in less than a few minutes or during even a single night. So this, of course, kind of threw my thinking back to the UFO business again. And last September, my wife and I went to an area near the base of Mount Shasta, and with a small group of people, we were looking there. We were there specifically to see if we could have sightings of any UFOs, anything like that. And while we were there, just starting right out from the very first night, we started seeing things. And one of the first things that we saw, that I certainly can't explain, was what we ended up referring to as flash bulbs. And it was like there was someone suspended maybe 1,000 feet above the mountain, and every now and then we'd see in the clear night sky these flashes go off, and except they were random. They had nothing to do with aircraft. They were just isolated in space, and they would sometimes vary from yellow to green or red or just be white. And this was, of course, very fascinating. It wasn't going on constantly. We'd see them, and then maybe half an hour we'd see some more. And while we were looking, then all of a sudden, this very bright, silvery object appeared, just like out of nowhere. It was just appeared right there, and stood still, maybe the size of the head of a straight pin. And then all of a sudden, out of that came this large flash, and the thing that was incredible about it was that the flash was square-shaped. It wasn't circular at all. It looked like a screen, and then on it, just briefly, you could see there was some sort of pattern there, and then it was just gone. The flash, everything, and that was pretty amazing, and it certainly got everybody excited. And as we stayed there and returned every night, we would see on occasion similar objects of about that size, high up, briefly there. They'd appear, they might zip out, a little distance and then make a turn and then disappear again. So it was just quite intriguing. And toward the end, one night we were out walking around the area where we normally were seeing these sightings, and there were lots of tall trees, and we happened to walk past a group of small trees that exposed an area of the sky that we really wasn't available to us from where we'd started. So as the trees panned out of the way, all of us there was this huge bright object in the sky, and it was just sitting there. It was tended to be in the south, and it looked like it might be that big around compared to the stars around it. So it just obviously wasn't anything I'd ever seen before. Utterly motionless, and so bright that it caused the shadows of the trees. You know how the light would hit the trees, and then there'd be very clear shadows. We could see everything very clearly. And it was an absolutely moonless night, and yet it seemed like they're the same as if it had been a bright full moon out there. So after we came back home, a few months later, I ran across this news release that was on the internet that had been sent out by a man named Benjamin Krem. And he was advising in the news release that in the near future there would be the appearance in the sky of what he called a bright star that would be so large that it would be seen both day and night. And just that description alone, made me think of this star or this object that I saw, because it was that large and bright that it could easily be seen during the day as well as the night, even though I only witnessed it at night. And then another few months after that, I was talking to a friend who works in Haiti. He's Haitian, and for years he's been actually working down there, establishing a school there for Haitian children in a more or less remote area where there's no schools. And so they're out in this area near a mountain, and he and his friends, he reported to me, while they were there in February, looked up one evening while they were getting ready to go to bed, and they saw a bright object in the sky, and he described it, and it sounded like the same size and everything else, and it just remained there. He says all night when he got up, even right up till morning when he get up to go to the bathroom. He said it just was there, and it was just sitting there, and they had no idea what it was, nor did they have a lot of experience with UFOs or anything like that. So they just finally concluded it was some sort of secret U.S. clandestine new technology of some kind, possibly a satellite. But I explained to him, he said, at the altitudes we're talking about, it couldn't be a satellite, because satellites have to move quite quickly in their orbits to keep from falling to the Earth, unless they're too far out to really see. So I had some pictures from YouTube sites of objects that had been recently taken since this news release that appeared very much to be in line with the description that was given in the news release that other people were getting in various places of the world. And he was looking through these pictures, and after a little bit he went, that's it right there, that one that and I believe it was in Norway or somewhere. So it was really quite an exciting result. In looking at the press release, beyond the mention of the star, of course, Benjamin Krem talked about why it would be there. And this part's certainly a little more challenging for a person who has to have hard, cold facts in order to believe anything. So he talked about it representing a sign that the Christ was returning to the world. And when I read that, I immediately connected what he was talking about, the appearance of a star, with the story of the Star of Bethlehem and the wise men, and the fact that the star literally moved in order to guide them to the location of Bethlehem. And I've known people speculate about the possibility that could have well been a UFO. So while this seems like a pretty way out there story, I'm also quite familiar with what's going on in the world today. And we're facing unprecedented crisis everywhere. And that's part of the prophecy associated with this that's commonly held by many religions in the world. So in that respect, I find it interesting that my reaction here to that statement is much more positive than skeptical.